Hey everyone out there on Facebook. This is Dr. Martha Simmons, and this morning at 11 I talked about finding your preaching voice, and I wanted to do the same thing today on Facebook Live. So welcome to talking about preaching and preachers, and today's subject is finding your preaching voice. I'm often asked by young preachers, how do I find my preaching voice? How do I know that this is really me? I'm going to give you 5 steps to do that. The first step to finding your preaching voice is finding the real you. Just find the real you. Some men would like to think that they have a soothing, soulful voice similar to Morgan Freeman, and most men do not. Nor do most women have high-pitched, squeaky voices, and many women unfortunately believe that they do, just because they don't sound manly. And what I want you to do to find your preaching voice is just believe your real voice. It's what you sound like, and there's some regional and age qualifiers. For instance, if you are Southern, it's okay that you have a Southern voice. Simply make sure that you enunciate in a way that people can totally understand every word. Maybe you're from Boston or the New England region, and instead of saying car, you say car. It's a regional thing. It happens. Just be sure that you're doing great enunciation. So it's okay if you have a Southern drawl. You'll also notice that your voice sounds totally different if you are 20 as opposed to 40 or 50. That happens. So don't expect your voice to sound like that of a 20-year-old if you're in your 40s. So if you go to listen to preachers on YouTube and you're in your 20s or your 30s, listen to other preachers in their 20s or their 30s. You can listen to older preachers perhaps for the type of substance you want or the way you want to approach a text, but don't listen to them for getting your preaching voice down. So, first, find the real you and trust that the real you is there. Step 2, be aware that most preachers do not find their real preaching voices for 10, sometimes 15 years. It's actually true. Unless they started preaching when they were 15, 16, and they were able to preach consistently for the next 10 years, they'll find their preaching voice sooner. But for most people who start in ministry at 23, 24, 25, it's going to take at least 10 years for you to find your real preaching voice. And you'll only find it then if you preach consistently all the time. So don't wear yourself out trying to find your real voice. It's coming. You will discover it in time if you allow you to be you. So you can try out other voices, but most often just do you. Now, for women and second career preachers, they're probably saying, but Dr. Simmons, I don't get many preaching opportunities. I may only preach 3 to 4 times a year. So how will I ever find my preaching voice at that rate? Well, I was you. I didn't get as many preaching opportunities as many of my male colleagues. So what did I do? I got a tape recorder and I recorded sermons that I was working on. I would literally preach the sermons and I'd listen to my voice, my pacing, etc. Then of course I practiced preaching when I was in the shower and things like that. You know, all preachers tend to do. So you really want to find your voice. If you want to find it quicker, make sure that you record yourself as you're practicing your preaching, and every time that you preach. Get that CD, that DVD, and listen to yourself. I know some people don't like doing that, but it really does help you find your preaching voice. It's not the same always as preaching before a congregation, but it's close enough to help you find out what you like about your preaching voice and the way you want to sound. Step number 3. Determine what you don't like about your preaching voice and get rid of that so that only your best preaching voice starts to come through. Let me explain this. Anyone can develop some bad preaching habits unaware. For example, a preacher I know who's a very good preacher had listened to people who were hoopers for many years. That's how he grew up. And he developed a hack. And one day I said to him, that hack that you have is not allowing preachers to hear the real you. Your voice is not coming out clearly. What's happening is that people are paying so much attention to that hack. And of course, as I said, he obtained it from listening to other preachers. That's how he grew up. But once I pointed it out to him, over time he got rid of it, and it didn't take even a year to do. And his real preaching voice came through loudly and clearly. Some of you grew up in households where people spoke very slowly, and so you speak very slowly. But we all know that if you speak too slowly, you're going to lose your audience, especially today's quick-paced, quick-thinking, gotta have it right now kind of audience. So you need to practice on speeding up a bit. And then, as I said, there are those regional speaking habits that we just pick up unaware, such as ka and car. Young people often say like continuously, and and what they're really doing is pausing and trying to get their thoughts together. All of those are bad preaching habits and speaking habits that can hurt you. So make sure that you are aware of what you're doing when you are preaching. Get rid of those bad habits. We all have them. And again, if you record yourself, you will hear and see your bad habits quicker. Step 4. If you really want to develop your preaching voice, don't hide your preaching voice, and this is akin to some of what I just addressed. Don't hide your preaching voice behind a hoop that you're trying to learn how to do, or don't hide it behind cadence. Let me explain. Most of us know what hooping is. For a scholarly definition, you can see my book, Preaching with Sacred Fire, African American Sermons from 1750 to the present. A shorthand way of explaining hooping is when you hoop, you're simply introducing melody into preaching. Jesus said, yes he did. You can hear the melody coming into my voice. So that's pretty much what it sounds like. Most African American preachers want to say that they can hoop. Not that they want to do it all the time, but when they want to do it, they want to say, I can hoop. But they're not really hoopers. So they're hiding their real voice, their best voice, behind that hoop. And it's a fake voice. And people who are listening can tell. They can tell immediately that you are not a hooper. And you see preachers do this, and many end up squealing and hollering and really sounding badly. But because most preachers no longer hoop, you really don't have to worry about this. So, what are preachers doing now? Most preachers are using cadence In other words, they are not using as much melody, but they have pacing and speed. That's the current way that some of our most well-known preachers are preaching. For instance, if you go on YouTube and listen to Jasmine Skerlar, Shalita Fomby, Freddie Haynes, Willie Francois, they all have cadence. They have this wonderful constant cadence and pacing. And unlike hooping, there's no melody in it, but there's a definite beat and a definite pace. So you can go to YouTube and see some of the names that I called, but you also, if you haven't learned cadence yet, make sure that you learn it over time before you introduce that into your preaching voice, or again, you'll have something that you're hiding behind. But if you can deliver cadence well, that's great. But generally, I would say just make sure that you are speeding up your preaching. That's one of the new things that we all need in our preaching arsenal. Just speed up just a little bit, especially if you tend to speak very slowly. Just speed up a bit. You'll see the great difference, and it will become part of your preaching voice. Step number 5 to find your preaching voice. Stand up straight when you preach, and we all know that as communicators. But most importantly, tied to standing up straight is relaxing. Just relax. God gave you something to say. God gave you the ability to say it, so just relax. And it's okay if you get that nervous feeling when you get up to preach. I still get it too. But what I've learned to do over time is to say to myself, I feel that nervous feeling, and what that really is fire. God is getting ready to unleash some fire through me to the people. So take some deep breaths. I hope that you will have rested well the evening before you are to preach, and then just relax. Most people who come to hear us preach want us to do well. They are pulling for you, so relax. Also, you can relax if you know your word well. So make sure you've gone over your sermon several times. If you can, as I said, record it and listen to the sermon before you preach it, and then you won't have to look down, worry about losing your space, your place rather, or those kinds of things, and you can just deliver a powerful word. And a part of relaxing is making sure that you are in the moment. Think about your sermon. Not what you're going to do after church, not even how the people are necessarily receiving it, but dive into the word. Be present in the moment. That's all for today. I'll see you on next Monday on Periscope at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, Periscope is tied to Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. Follow me at Dr. Martha Simmons or at Martha on Preaching. Our subject for next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time will be help. I've got a preaching engagement. Now what? So I'm going to discuss engagement etiquette, including honorariums. Take care. Be blessed.